Hey guys, it's Thomas here. So today I won't be smiling a lot because of my broken tooth still. Now before we start, please be careful of scammers pretending to be me or other YouTubers trying to scam money off you. Now they even created a channel with my photo. Now for those of you who have ordered a Galion amplifier, if you have not received an email from me, like from the Galion-audio.com email, please send me an email. Now, so today's video will be a story regarding how I voiced the TS120. The Galion TS120 was designed to be extremely transparent, neutral, with the goal of delivering a high-end sound. Now, some of you might be asking, what audiophile university did you go to be able to say there's such a thing as high-end sound? Was it on your final exam to describe what high-end sound is? Well, yeah, okay. The logic goes like this. One thing me and my audio buddies notice is as you move up the audio world, gear tends to sound more and more neutral. There's less coloration, meaning less exaggeration of certain frequencies. Of course, I'm making a blanket statement. So when Mr. Liu from Deutsch designed the TS120, he built the amp to measure really well. Lots of clarity, extremely transparent, and he didn't understand why I wanted to add tone control. He said he's trying to build a high-end amp to sound extremely neutral, and I wanted to add color to it with tone control. Did you know the Deutsch 10 MK1 was voiced purely based on measurements? The capacitors they chose had the best measurements. That is why I said in that video that only 30% of the people will like it. It was crazy, out of this world, airy, and there was so much clarity that for 70% of the people, I would say they would find it too bright. So in the comments of that video, I said, think twice if you have clips or focal. Now after I made the video, Deutsch told me that I can change it to sound less bright. And I did. I modified it to the point where I thought, okay, it would be more accepted by the general audience. Sure, I lost the crazy level airy soundstage, but it was a good compromise. What Deutsch did was they immediately took what I did to my Deutsch MK1 and applied it to theirs. So that is why whenever someone sends me an email about their Deutsch 10, my first question is always, is it bright? The answer I always got is no. So recently someone even left a message, a comment in one of my videos. He said, Thomas, I don't understand why you said only 30% of the people will like it, because he thought it sounded amazing and most people would like it. And that's when I explained to him, wow, they changed the voicing based on what I did to my MK1. Now, that was for MK1 and MK2. Eventually MK3 came out and they sent me one. Yeah, the sound of the MK3 is different, especially in the bass. And I can understand why Jay Sosik found it on the brightest side, despite him calling it the best sounding amp under $3,000. So with the Galion TS120 they sent me, the amp measures really well, but they were careful with the voicing and it sounded great out of the box. I let all my audio buddies listen to it and they all found the brightness to be correct. With lots of energy, and overall everyone thought it was excellent. However, there were two things that bothered me. First, there was a strong mid-range bump. So if you listen to piano, it is as if whoever was playing the piano drank one too many Red Bulls and is hitting the keys a bit harder than it should. The end result was everything was more energetic and Mr. Kanta loved it. It was exciting, but there was one problem. If you listen carefully, the singer sounds a bit younger. So I told Mr. Kanta, look, I know you love it, but I can't bring an amplifier to market with the singer sounding a bit younger. He said, it's a question of taste. I said, no. The mid-range has to be correct, and that is non-negotiable. So I had to change some capacitors in the amp to something that costs like 10 times more. By changing those capacitors, and especially after break-in, the mid-range bump is gone, and the singer sounds correct now. So after dealing with the mid-range bump, I had to fine-tune the sound. As I said, originally the brightness is correct, but I've listened to enough amps to know that if you compare it to a very high-end amplifier, it is not refined enough. For example, if you put it next to the $6,000 Galion 170 Soul I have here, you can tell right away the Galion can sparkle way better and it's more refined. Yes, I know the Galion is double the price, but I'm used to that level of refinement, and if I'm going to bring an amp to market, I want it to be at least a certain level. Although everyone told me that what I had was really good, I wanted more. To fine-tune the sound, Doge sent me a bunch of capacitor, and by changing them, I changed the sound. What I did, however, is I threw them all out. And I went out to buy another set of capacitors because what they sent me, sure, they measure well, but they were a bit too bright for me. I wanted something a little bit smoother. And you know what? I was so lucky to have met a few subscribers who were really helpful. So they would help me change the capacitors. I would listen for days or weeks, and then I would get them to change it again. This was time consuming because I needed to drive over, take apart the amp, and solder in the new capacitors. And as you can see, I have quite a bit of capacitors here. Now, Mr. Amplifier installed a socket eventually, so I can just change the capacitors without needing to solder. So after months of trying different voicing, finally I got it to where I wanted it to be. My challenge was to determine what is the correct brightness. I wanted it to sparkle like no tomorrow, but not to the point it becomes fatiguing. A lot of the amp will play it safe and voice it on the smoother side, but you don't get oh my gosh level by playing it safe. Right now, the top end sparkles. Refinement and micro details can rival the Galion 170 Soul, which costs double. I had a lot of my audio buddies listen to it, and 90% of them said the sharpness is great. Only one found it a bit too bright with the transparent setting. With the musical setting, no one found it bright. Remember, it has two settings, right, my amp? Now, if you find it too bright still, just use smoother tubes or tone control. Now, why I'm so obsessed about this is because if you don't have enough brightness, you don't have God level airy soundstage. Finding that right balance was not easy. You want sparkling top end with lots of micro detail and oh my gosh airy soundstage, yet you don't want listening fatigue? Yeah, good luck. It took me months, hundreds of hours of listening and testing to get there. The annoying part is break-in, because I would choose a certain value and it sounded great at first, but as the units start breaking in, the sound changed, and whatever value I have chosen is no longer good. And I have to change it again and then break it in again. You know, I wonder is that why most gears sound better after break-in? Because any designers who care about sound actually will spend hundreds of hours listening to the gear and voicing it, right? Now, what I realized after spending months with this amp and with many of my audio buddies is that this amp's nature is that it is extremely neutral and transparent. Clarity is off the charts, and as much as I wanted to make it sound smooth, I also wanted to embrace its natural strength. So, the difference between transparent mode and musical mode, the delta is not really big. You will notice the upper mids is smoother in the musical mode, and for that reason, I find myself able to push the volume with no problem with bright speakers in musical mode. Now, you might ask, why don't I just go all the way and make the musical mode buttery smooth? The reason is that as I make it smoother, the measurements got worse. So I need to keep a balance between both. So guys, if you measure the amp and find the measurements not textbook excellent, it's because of a decision I made with my ears. The final result of months of voicing is this. This is a neutral sounding amp with a touch of color. The top end is really extended and it will sparkle like no tomorrow. Mid-range down to upper bass is linear and flat. If you want a bit of color, more fat, just use tone control, okay? And it will add warmth to the presentation. The tone control affects the upper bass. So why linear bass, you said? The benefit of linear bass is that it's very nuanced. The lower bass of this TS120 is very strong. I mean, the dynamic contrast is one of the best I've heard. But because the mids and upper bass are linear, despite having strong bass, you don't have that fat, bloated presentation. That is why Mr. Vintage called it high-end neutral sound. When I gave the engineer the final value for the voicing, I remember they're telling me, Dude, it's going to add a bit of color to the amp. Yeah, I know, because for those of you who follow me, you know I like color. As I said, this amp is neutral with a light touch of color. So that is the story of how I voiced the amp. Now the interesting part is I voiced it with stock tubes and my Silverline Sonata speakers as reference. In another video, I'll tell you how the sound changes dramatically with different tubes. There's so many possibilities with this amp. For example, with the Apertura Edena I have here, I put Galion tubes in and I got a thicker mid-range. It is no longer as linear and neutral as with stock tubes. I put TAT 6550 tubes in and it adds a bit of smoothness on the upper mids to the amp. Anyways, that's going to be a video for the future, and with that, I will see you next time.